OPEC and its allies have announced a cut in oil production by 1.64 million barrels per day. This is bad news for industrial and oil-consuming countries. Goldman Sachs predicts that the average international crude oil price will rise to $89 per barrel in April. As a basic energy source and industrial raw material, when oil prices go up, so do manufacturing costs, which ultimately reflect in commodity prices. In my opinion, this oil production cut and price increase will lead to a series of chain reactions. Undoubtedly, the EU will once again become the scapegoat and silently bear the negative impact of the oil production cut. So, can they resist the temptation of Russia's low-priced oil at this time? Why is the Middle East always against the United States, who gave them the courage? Furthermore, in this oil production cut, what roles are China and the United States playing? Hi! Welcome to Auto Age. Before we started today's video, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Okay, let's get started. Everyone is concerned about the impact of the oil production cut on the United States, Russia, and the EU, but in fact, the impact on China is also significant. China is the world's largest industrial manufacturing country, the world's largest oil importer, and the world's second-largest oil consumer. When oil prices rise, it directly causes industrial costs to rise, and raw material costs for manufacturing also rise. In 2022, when the Russo-Ukrainian War broke out, international oil prices skyrocketed to over $130 per barrel, and China's domestic gasoline prices also rose to over 9 renminbi per liter. After that, the oil price fell below $80, and China's domestic oil price went through a long adjustment before returning to the 7 yuan era. For industrial countries like China, low oil prices are more favorable for economic prosperity and price stability. In the 1970s, when the OPEC was first established, Middle Eastern oil-producing countries joined forces to raise oil prices, doubling them in the short term, which blew up the economies of Europe and the United States, causing stagflation in the United States. Europe and the United States are both industrial powers and cannot afford high energy costs, resulting in a large number of small and medium-sized enterprises going bankrupt, and high unemployment rates. Today, China has become the world's largest industrial manufacturing country. Therefore, in terms of oil prices, China, the United States, and Europe have a common interest. Because the increase in oil prices is beneficial only to oil capital and oil-producing countries, it is harmful to other countries. However, the situation is different for the United States, China, and the EU. China and the EU have very scarce oil resources and cannot benefit from rising oil prices. However, the United States is different. It is the world's largest oil-producing and consuming country. The U.S. oil industry has a certain level of internal circulation effect, which can promote the prosperity of oil conglomerates. However, the downside of rising oil prices in the U.S. lies not in oil itself, but outside of it. As oil prices rise, American oil giants can make a fortune. However, ordinary American citizens with voting power have to bear the risk of high inflation. Under conditions of high inflation, the purchasing power of the American people will decline, which will bring two effects. First, it affects voting. The 2024 U.S. presidential election will begin in the second half of the year. If the Biden administration cannot control the inflation rate, the Democratic Party will have a hard time winning the election, and Trump is likely to make a comeback. OPEC's production cuts have made Biden very annoyed and are not good for the Democratic Party. Second, it may trigger an economic crisis. When purchasing power declines, consumer demand will decrease, industrial enterprise orders will decrease, and energy costs will skyrocket, thereby causing a large number of business closures and forming a vicious cycle. In a good capitalist economy, it is necessary to control inflation, raise workers' wages, and promote consumption. Otherwise, capitalists' products will not sell, and in the end, everyone will suffer together. This is the fundamental reason why workers in EU countries like to strike, and why the capital side often ultimately reaches a compromise by offering a pay raise. But the premise for the capital side to make concessions is that its costs must be under control. If labor costs increase, other costs must come down, otherwise, many companies will not be able to operate. At this critical juncture, when workers demand a pay raise, oil-producing countries announce production cuts and price increases, which is a betrayal of Europe and America. From a holistic perspective, even if the US is the world's largest oil-producing country, it cannot only consider the profits of American oil capitalists, but ignore the status of American industrial enterprises and ordinary citizens. In this round of oil production cuts, Russia has also joined in. For Russia, this cannot be said as taking sides with the Middle East. On the contrary, Russia has not benefited from this round of production cuts and price increases. Due to the international sanctions imposed on Russia by Europe and the United States, Russia's share in the international oil market is much lower than that of Saudi Arabia, yet it still has to reduce production by 500,000 barrels a day just like Saudi Arabia. Russia has cut production too much, and with a smaller market share, its prices are not as good as Saudi Arabia's, so it can't make much money and is just trying not to lose any. According to official data released by Russia, the price of Urals crude oil had already fallen to $49 per barrel in January and February, only rising to $55 per barrel in March. In the first 2 months of 2023, Russia's oil and gas revenue was cut in half, and the fiscal deficit expanded to $34.19 billion. Russia's goal is to raise the price of Urals crude oil to over $60 per barrel, while OPEC's goal is to maintain the price of crude oil at over $80 per barrel. Since Russia's Urals crude oil is cheap, it has surpassed Saudi Arabia and has steadily become China's largest oil importer. In other words, Russia's crude oil price increases are mainly aimed at China and India. For oil-producing countries in the Middle East, the global economic downturn has led to a decrease in oil demand. At this time, there are 2 options for these countries to maintain their own interests. One is to increase production and reduce prices, using price to promote volume and increase total income. The second is to cut production and raise prices, selling less, but at a higher price. Oil is a non-renewable resource, so the second option is clearly more sustainable. The reason why Middle Eastern oil-producing countries dare to confront the Democratic Party is mainly because the entire NATO group is embroiled in the Ukraine war and has no time to manipulate the Middle East, allowing these countries to have strong independence in formulating policies. Moreover, Saudi Arabia has reconciled with Iran and Syria, and the Middle East has united, which has strengthened the power of Middle Eastern oil-producing countries. For China, this is a moment to test economic resilience, to see who can bear higher energy costs, wear down opponents, and then pick up the equipment. The United States can produce oil independently, but the challenge is how to tax American oil companies and benefit ordinary American people. Otherwise, it would only benefit oil capital and harm the American people. China has cheap Russian oil, which can offset the high-priced oil from the Middle East to some extent. The EU has become a scapegoat, especially Germany and France, the most unfortunate countries. The most challenging issue is the G7's oil price limit on Russia, which is difficult to sustain. Okay, that's all for today. Please put your comments below, and share your insightful ideas with other people. Your precious time with us is highly appreciated. See you.